Top 10 cents of RWBY Volume Seb. Number 10, Ironwood versus Watts. Okay, full disclosure, some of these entries, including this one, would be much higher on the rank if they mattered at all. And I'm not basing that on the external factors like the commentary or the Q&A things.
Ironwood does have a semblance. I believe we called it metal. The whole thing is just this kind of like iron resolve / will to kind of like push himself to do what he's decided he's going to do.
Or like push through something like searing the flesh off your arm if like this is the goal he needs to accomplish.
But Watts and Ironwood have this baller fight. A clash of titans, brain versus brawn, sheer unadulterated willpower.
You're not the only one who can count.
And nobody dies. You see, Jimmy Woodman over here, who throughout the whole volume has actively endangered civilians, suddenly up and decides that the super hacker is worth keeping alive and bringing back to your office without searching his bag, even. Look, this is a top 10 list and not a why it wasn't higher list. So any complaint I might have aside, this is one of the most dynamic and energetic fights ever in the show. Mostly because it eschewed the whole ground thing and allowed the choreography to come at you from every possible angle. But they're also willing to just break from that and shove this nerd in a locker for a couple flurries of blows. Number 9, Cinder screaming.
She's mine!
I know, right? Cinder as one of the highlights of the volume? For sure, but just listen to this. For someone who's been allergic to having a personality for upwards of 6 years now, she finally has like a thing that she wants.
You think hoarding power means you'll have it forever, but it just makes the rest of us hungrier!
And a thing that she needs. And standing between her and those goals are the emotionless automaton and Cortana. This screechy nonsense sounds so desperate that it made me feel something other than contempt for Cinder for the first time in ever. Plus, it's right smack dab between an okay fight and Cinder dying. Yes, she died. She's not going to be in Volume 8, because she died in this scene. She's not alive anymore. Ever. Number 8. Ironwood shooting Oscar.
It's general.
This one's self-explanatory, right? My man's done. Look in his eyes. Oscar's going on and on about some stuff. Who cares? Not Ironwood. He's like, look, I know I have no intention of killing the main bad guy, who has the knowledge and power to single-handedly undermine everything I've worked for, but we don't actually need civilians, right? Number 7. Whitley being an absolute bellend.
Where's Klein?
What an interesting way to say, hello, dear brother, how have you been?
Now, Volume 7 as a whole had ample opportunity to be all about Weiss, but none of it was. So, to get this one little moment right past the halfway point of the volume, where she's openly confronted by the fact that her actions have consequences, in between abandonments of the character she's currently addressing, is honestly beautiful. Number 6. Crow and Clover play cards. Now, we're just getting into some good old human moments. I really appreciate this one because Clover sounds like he has some actual concern in his voice.
You shouldn't do that, you know?
I just think it's cool to see someone treat Crow like he's not okay, but at the same time, also not treat that like it's a personal slight against them. Whereas Winter and Glinda were like...
He was drunk. He's always drunk.
And RWBY and Yang were like...
We've been out looking for Oscar.
It brings a little life to the scene to watch someone see him with fresh eyes and treat him differently than we've come to expect as a result. Number 5. Weiss goes to the movies.
Hey, Oscar and I are hitting the movies if anyone wants to... Oh, okay.
This one should also be self-explanatory. It's hilarious. Watching the characters sit there and be sidelined by the Volume 7 plot is, well, I mean, it's to be expected at this point. But for Weiss to simply nope the whole concept of the scene and walk away to go hang out with these two, I forgot their names, has the same energy as Indiana Jones shooting the sword guy. At least, to me it does, hence why it's in the top 5. Number 4. Tyrion catching the arrow. Tyrion. What can I even say about him that wasn't said by this clip right here? What an explosive personality, am I right? So yeah, episode 11 slaps. You can probably tell, because it made the list twice. with both of the fights in it. Even though I'm singling out the arrow-catching showstopper, the whole fight is great. They even do that thing I hate where one character just swings dumbly into the camera, but they subvert it this time by having off-screen interference. So I was gonna take points away, but you know what?
10 million points for Griffin Puff!
Number 3. Tyrion. What can I even say about him that... Wait, that's how I introed the last clip. This...
Will of our goddess!
And the scene leading up to it are marvelous. And the cramped QCQ fight in between them is fine. However, a lot of people think that this was dumb of Robin. On the contrary, I think it's some of the best character development we've had in the show up to this point. See, her introduction in episode 5, she trusted Clover, and look where it got her. A lost election and a hole still in the wall. Then, because of Yang and Blake, in episode 7, she's willing to work with Ironwood and his lackeys, when they're helping Mantle. But now, him and his boss are off arresting some of the only people actually trying to save Mantle citizens. So choosing to fight Clover here is the sum total of her experience over the course of the volume. You know, a character arc. You know, one of those things that none of the main characters have. So we get this weird sensation of narrative fulfillment trampled by the agent of chaos Tyrion, stealing the pilot's hat before doing his goddess's will. Needless to say, I approve. Number 2, thumbs. My man Tyrion. What can I even say about him that... this sounds familiar. Anyway, he's a mad lad. His tongue is out, his maniacal giggling, the Dutch angles, used for the appropriate effect, I might add. He breaks his own thumb, and it looks like he just lost No Nut November. What pushes this scene over the top for me is just how deep and growly the ominous laughter is. We're seeing business mode Tyrion right here. The only thing that could make the scene better if he was still wearing the pilot hat from the last scene. Number 1, Ironwood hug. Look, I just like human moments, okay? This is also an excuse to compliment the character design. I mean the beard. It's just the beard. It's great beard. Dude's tired. And he needs a hug. And he gets one. Sorry I had so little to say about the top 2 scenes, but I made this video in a day, so get off my back. And now, the bottom 10 subs of RWBY. Actually, you know, Volume 7 is so, like, pulseless that it's actually hard for me to even say that 10 scenes can stand out for their badness. Like, I guess I kind of got worked up when Nora, Ren, and Ruby spend almost a minute repeating the exposition we already know. I know that almost a minute, or 44 seconds, doesn't sound that bad, but they are agonizingly slow seconds to get through as they methodically run down all the reasons that this show doesn't have a plot.
Jin said she can't be beaten. She told Oz that he couldn't destroy her.
The first scene that actually stands out as a disaster relative to the rest of the volume is when Penny and Winter reenact that one scene from Halo 4. This scene is also under a minute, but it feels like it took over an hour off my life.
You were just speaking from your heart.
And that is precisely the problem.
But who is the real robot? Is a trope that needs to die. Having characters stand around and talk about a hypothetical plot that could be happening instead of the stupid conversation about it is bad. Having characters stand around and talk about why nothing is happening is worse. And having characters stand around and talk about emotions they could be feeling should get your fingers forcibly removed by the script protective services so you never endanger another blank page again. The third worst scene. You know, I didn't think the writers could ruin Neo because she doesn't talk. But then I remember the only reason I think writing only affects the dialogue is because my brain's been rotted by so much RWBY. They can absolutely ruin Neo by sticking her in abysmal fights. Like, look, the goal is to keep the relics safe. And long story short, neither side makes an attempt to do that. I don't want to babble on about this for 20 minutes, so you can just watch the RWBY is Broken video. Wait, what do you mean he doesn't make those anymore? Ah, crap, I guess you'll just have to wait 5 years to see my Volume 7 full review. The second worst scene. The royal they, wanted a scene with some heartfelt mumbo-jumbo about how racism is bad.
Because in Chapter 3, one of the things that we tried to get in was a bonding moment between Blake and Marrow. over, what's it like being a faunus.
But they decided it would take too long.
3 was already so packed, so we had to cut it out of that episode.
So instead, they used their precious time to do the opposite by having a faunus character who they made black for no discernible reason handwave systemic oppression and slavery.
Anyway, I didn't come over here looking to solve systemic societal issues.
Made all the more disgusting by the fact that he is not only in a greater position of power than any of the people whose plights he's ignoring.
Specifically, not just being a faunus in Atlas, but a faunus in Atlas who is part of like Atlas's poster boy military team.
Yes.
But he's also very obviously the bottom bitch of his own group of enforcers for a totalitarian dictator. Now, this would be great if it was like Torchwick backstory or something. Something to really get the blood pumping to hate this character. But get this, he's a good guy. Real human beings in current year are supposed to think Marrow is something other than pure evil, and that's just gross. And the number 1 worst scene of RWBY Volume 7, Everybody Lives. So, for a brief moment, I was foolish enough to allow myself to believe that they got rid of Oscar, Cinder, and Watts on a highlight for each of them. A blaze of glory that did the impossible job of overcoming their worthlessness since their introduction into the show. But no, the writers just don't know how to write. Here's a clip from the commentary.
It's the first episode. No one's gonna die.
But look, here we are in the last episode, and nobody's gonna die either. Except that one character who wasn't in the show. And the queerbait guy. Wait, that's actually problematic and malicious. Why wasn't that the worst scene? Oh right, the fight was dope. Damn. Anyway, as an apology for not being able to muster a whole bottom 10 scenes for you, and mostly to annoy Vex, I'm gonna rank the episodes from best to worst really quick. Best to worst, because it's painfully obvious that 11, Gravity, is the best episode. 2 sick fights, 1 scene that, while not being a sick fight, ultimately didn't ruin anything. One of the best episodes of RWBY. Second place goes to episode 2, A New Approach. The hug was in it. Yeah, that's the only reason. Volume 7 was really bad. Third place goes to episode 3, The Ace Operatives. Look, if you're gonna introduce 5 new characters to shunt your mains down a toilet, the least you could do is give them a proper introduction before writing 4 of them like they're RWBY characters. Subsequently also before fridging them for the sake of pretending the actual main characters learned anything from being glorified background chumps for a season.
You were. Then you trained us.
Speaking of hastily fridging new mains for the sake of the old mains, episode 12 with Friends Like These is gonna take the 4th spot. Because look. Crow hates himself. He internally, subconsciously decided that he does not deserve to be happy. He made a completely arbitrary change to his own status quo at the end of the last volume, and I guess in a haze of sobriety, he remembers that he isolated himself and drank for a reason, that reason being the bad luck semblance that made it physically impossible for him to be close to people without endangering them. To Crow, this is out of his control. He's not even taking responsibility for the fight he started. He says,
"You don't know my friends. That's how it always goes."
Okay, Vex, you can start typing now. 5th place goes to episode 5, Sparks, because of things I've already mentioned. 6th place goes to episode 8, You're Cordially Invited, because I have one nice thing to say about it, and even coupled with the one bad thing I already said about it, still puts it above episodes 7, 9, and 10, which all tie for being the 5th worst episode. Now, if you put a gun to my head and forced me to put those 3 episodes in order, I'd honestly welcome the sweet oblivion. But if you threatened not to shoot me unless I picked an order, it would be 9, because of this line delivery alone.
You know?
10, for the sheer audacity of acknowledging me.
I think I have a plan. What is it?
Thanks for watching my reviews, guys. But can we talk about that plan, though? Like, instead of attacking its underbelly,
go for its belly!
They attack the armored tusk in order to stab it in the underbelly with the tusk. Like, You could cut out the middleman right there pretty easily. And then 7 for wasting a name like Worst Case Scenario on an episode that isn't even the worst one. 4th worst goes to the finale Enemy of Trust for making Neo suck and Cinder live. 3rd worst goes to episode 6, A Night Off, and I already said why. 2nd worst is episode 1, The Greatest Kingdom, and it'll probably take me half an hour to explain why when I finally get around to making the full review. And finally, the worst episode should come as no surprise to you if you are able to keep track of the first baker's dozen of numbers. Episode 4, Pomp and Circumstance, because, oh god, it's so cringy. And, okay, look, I've been watching RWBY for years now, and only 2 episodes have made me cringe. The Raven speech from Volume 5, Episode 6.
So far, you've done nothing but accept what others tell you.
And one continuous cringe that lasted the full duration of Volume 7, Episode 4. The way Eddie bungled the comedy is so out of place and up its own ass, it makes me wonder where he even found room in an ass to misplace the comedy. Some of the jokes are just silly voices while flat out describing things that make the show actively bad.
This is a great time to go exploring. We haven't done that in so long. Ruby, we just explored a whole continent on foot before flying to this one.
The way he establishes the difference between RWBY and the Aesops is...
I want to have my friends' backs just like that.
Friends?
Come on, man, you're writing both halves of this conversation. You don't have to stretch the limits of my patience to do it.
This isn't the schoolyard, kid.
It's not mutually exclusive either. And that's, like, acknowledged in the middle of the scene.
We get along well enough, sure.
Like, RWBY characters don't get any love at the best of times, and now you're reverse double caricaturizing the people you just spent an episode trying to introduce? And, oh, they get their licenses too! And at the end, they get jobs, and one of the jobs is to protect children.
We need someone to escort children to pre-primary school down in Mantle.
And everyone's like, no, nah, not for me, screw them kids. But wait, okay, hold on. So the parents put an assumably paying job on the bounty board because they're so worried that they need a huntsman to watch their kids cross the street. But that revelation comes within 10 minutes of Ironwood telling Clover that his very presence will cause such a panic that 1,000,000 falls of beacon will happen at once.
If people see too many huntsmen milling around, they'll get nervous.
And Weiss is like...
Not friends. Family.
You know, like the female brothers I never had, who my mom totally won't tell me to look out for. And, look, and then they pull this heart-to-heart out of their ass, where Crow just, like, says Summer's name and nothing else of value.
Your mom, Summer, would be proud of you.
I was excited to get this moment between Crow and RWBY because it's kind of the first time we get to see them being so, like, familiar or, like, fatherly almost.
You just opened up, like, a whole can of worms by saying fatherly.
I was going to say familyly, but that wasn't a word, so I had to pivot at the end. I'm sorry.
The word is familiar, and you said it! Hey guys, if you made it all the way to the end, remember to like the video. And remember that pledging to Patreon gets you access to the uncut Volume 8 reactions. You can go watch episodes 1 and 2 right now while I work on the Volume 7 commentary breakdown, which will be out shortly.